Piers Morgan, great interviewer, he has this show called Uncensored. And recently, he had Richard Dawkins on his show. And of course, the origin of life almost immediately came up. The interview is about 40 minutes long. It's a good interview, feel free to watch it. It wasn't all about God and religion, although arguably everything is about God and religion. But I'm going to cover some of the key questions that Piers asked Dawkins. Right, so the first question that Piers asked was, what is the origin of human life? Before we get into that, remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss, what is this, an episode? A show? What do I call it? Lego. Right, so this is how this is going to work. We've got Piers on this side, Richard on this side. What was in the beginning? What do we know now about where we've come from, and what don't we know? Okay, we know once you've got a self-replicating entity, which nowadays is DNA, but it wasn't originally. Once we've got life started, once Darwinian natural selection has got going, then we pretty much understand the 4 billion year history of what's given rise to us and all other living creatures. We don't know how it started, and that's a mystery, and it may always be a mystery because it happened a very, very long time ago, and we may never know exactly what did happen. We know the kind of thing it had to be. I can't keep that up for the entire. What kind of thing do you think it was? The origin of a self-replicating molecule, a molecule that makes copies of itself. DNA is such a molecule. But the original one was almost certainly not DNA, because DNA is what's called a high-tech replica. There had to be a precursor to DNA, something the laws of chemistry gave rise to. A molecule which had this unusual property of making copies of itself, which mutated, changed in random ways, and that gave rise to competition between rival versions of it. And that gave rise to the whole panoply? It's a funny word. Of life, eventually. Okay, so I'm Catholic, was raised Catholic, so I'm a religious person, which I know is anathema to you. My arguments with atheists historically have always come down to one thing, and maybe you've got an answer which will persuade me of the folly of my ways, which is this. What was there at the start? We don't know. But I don't know, and you don't know. But it's a fallacy to think that because I don't understand how it happened, that therefore God did it. That's just weak. But I'm prepared to have an open mind about this. But I have never met a human brain that can explain to me what happened. So you go for the Big Bang argument. What was there before? Physicists are debating this. I'm not a physicist. Reminds me of...
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
I can't. Not in this context. So I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word...
What a joke. Right, where were we? My point is that they don't know, and I don't know, and you don't know, and it doesn't help to postulate a God that did it. You're certain it's not a God, and yet you admit you don't know. No, I'm certain that it doesn't help to postulate something very complicated at the outset, because what we've got is primeval simplicity, and from that stems everything. What science does is it starts with simplicity, which is relatively easy to understand, and from that it develops into the whole of the universe and the whole of life. It doesn't help to start with complexity, and a creator has to be complex. Yeah, but here's the thing. He's speaking in terms of approach, in terms of a scientific approach. He doesn't seem to be recognizing the fact that life is complex. Whatever your theory is, you're explaining something that begins as a complex thing, not a simple thing. Anyway, get into that later. You're asking me to consider that my own belief in a deity above human thinking and understanding and brain power, that was there universally, that my theory is scientifically flawed, whereas I would throw back at you, okay, but I need to be given an alternative. I need some scientist somewhere to explain to me, right, you've got the 4 billion years, all right, but then what was there before that? Scientists can't answer that. They say things like it's like going north of the North Pole. But the point is this: science can explain things starting with simplicity and working up to complexity. No, science cannot explain the origin of life because that is not the function of science. But where science can't explain something, in the case I just gave you, is it not possible that you're all wrong on the atheist side of the argument? You might get a shocking surprise one day when you're no longer with us. Love that. It's possible. It's highly unlikely. Why? Scientists take pride in admitting when they don't know. And they don't know what happened before the Big Bang. They don't even admit that the word before means anything with respect to the Big Bang. And saying it has to mean something, or saying that there is a before, or asking the question, what was before, is a naive statement. To which I immediately respond with my basic human brain, time began. When did it begin? What was there before? It's a fairly obvious question. It is a very obvious question. It's too obvious, and physicists will tell you that you're being naive. But they don't know why I'm being naive. Why is it not possible that there is a superior being, which many people believe in different ways? And then he does a classic diversion, or a false comparison. It's possible that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. All sorts of things are possible. You can't deny that. I don't know that fairies don't exist. Maybe leprechauns do. Do you think you've gotten milder about this as you've gotten older? Have you got more accepting that you may be wrong, less certain? Well, yes, of course. A scientist may always be wrong, and that's definitely a thing that a scientist has to say. I don't have all the answers. I mean, no scientist has all the answers, but the one thing you shouldn't say, that because I don't know, therefore God did it. I think my Richard Dawkins is all right. Could do with some work. Right. So, The Origin of Life. Starting light. Love it. In his 1986 book, The Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, that evolution is the explanation for the existence and variation of all of life. This is false. Evolution is a mechanism which consists of two things: natural selection and mutation. Evolution does not explain the existence of life. Dawkins admits to this over and over to Piers, and I think partly the reason why he's admitting this is what Piers observed, is that in his older age, he's gotten a bit milder. Maybe he's considering death more. Evolution cannot explain the existence of the mutating replicator on which it depends. It's logically obvious that evolution, whatever it does, depends on the existence of life. It, therefore, cannot explain it. And though he has spent his career demeaning religion and mocking belief in God, he concedes that his worldview cannot answer the question, what is the origin of life? He instead expresses in his stubborn atheism, we don't know, but I don't know, and you don't know, and it's a fallacy to think that because I don't understand how it happened, therefore God did it. That's just weak. So it's weak to posit God as an explanation of the origin of life. Why? Why is that weak? He doesn't know. He doesn't give a reason why he believes that that is weak. He had opportunity. He says that physicists will call such a question naive, but he doesn't explain why it's naive, even why they may think it's naive. There's just no explanation as to why it's weak to posit God. And he falsely assumes that the reason people believe in God, the reason that one would postulate God as an explanation for the origin of life is that we don't know. So what he's doing is he's projecting the God of the gaps type of thinking onto all people who believe and argue for the existence of God, when that's not what we believe. This is all quite irrational. It comes down to a matter of choice. Either in the beginning, particles and energy somehow came together to produce elements, which somehow came together to produce macromolecules, which somehow came together to produce life, which somehow came together to produce consciousness, which somehow came together to produce morality, which somehow came together to produce the idea of God, but this God doesn't exist. Or, in the beginning was the Word, and all things were made by him. The longest word we know is the genetic word that determines the human genome. We recognize instantly that short words are the product of intelligence. What keeps us from acknowledging that long words, or the longest word, is the product of intelligence? Prejudice. Probably. Almost certainly. 100%. Prejudice that the solution must be an unguided naturalistic process. Why? Why is there such pressure in that direction? Because if life didn't start by an unguided natural process, that's the end of materialism as a philosophy. And that is a very high price to pay for some people, like Richard Dawkins. The existence of life cannot be explained by evolutionary biology. Sugar. Listen, if you are a Christian coffee company and you want to, do that thing where the content creator shows your product and whatever, I would gladly drink your coffee. Gladly. Over Starbucks. But I don't know you exist. So here we are. The existence of life is not explained by biological evolution. Let's assume that evolution does lots of things, but what it doesn't do is explain the existence of the mutating replicator on which it depends. And that mutating replica is a micro-miniaturized factory of unbelievable sophistication. So much for starting simple. The language of life, the genetic code, is extremely ancient, according to what we know or have been told. It has scarcely changed at all. That raises questions as to how it could possibly have developed in the short time available, from the cooling of the Earth until it was cool enough to support carbon-based life, which goes back to a very short time after the Earth was cool enough. The cell is an information processor. You've got a signaling system in the biological macromolecule. You've got a signaling system, you've got a code, and you've got a translator of that code. In every other area where we see such a thing, the inference is upward to intelligence. Instantly, immediately, you see such a thing and you infer that it has been intelligently designed. Why not with this? Evolution as an explanation for the origin of human life or any life is just a theory. It is not a fact. Evolution cannot get going until you have a mutating replicator. Somehow it has to happen. And people have been working on that since 1953. Miller and Urey won the Nobel Prize because they thought they had discovered the secret to life. But nobody knows. That's the confession. How did life start?
We don't know.
Whatever else is involved, there is a designing intelligence behind it. It used to be the darling objection of those wed to the atheistic, materialistic view that given enough time, anything was possible. All things were possible. When time was infinite, aquatic creatures could become flying mammals. When time was infinite, amoebas could become redwoods. It was only a matter of time. Given enough time, life could arise from non-life. And given enough time, we could prove all of it. For time covered a multitude of sins. That is, among other things, a lot of blind faith. The eventual, inevitable consensus about the Big Bang put an end to that pipe dream. One of my favorite quotes by Robert Jastrow in his book God and the Astronomers. He says, "The discovery of a definite cosmic beginning is an exceedingly strange development, unexpected by all but the theologians. They have always accepted the word of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It is unexpected because science has had such extraordinary success in trying the chain of cause and effect backward in time. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." I just love that. It makes me so warm inside. Alfred North Whitehead, philosopher in the 16th and 17th centuries, and him along with many others, commented that men became scientists because they expected law in nature. They expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. Serious thinkers today, however, insist that it is necessary to choose between God and science, almost as if you are choosing between religions, because no two religions can be true at the same time. Believing for no good reason that God is a weak or a naive explanation for the origin of life, for that which science cannot explain. But God is not the same kind of explanation as scientific explanation. God does not compete with mechanism and law. Rather, God is the intelligent designer, the reason there is mechanism and law, something rather than nothing. It seems so that people are desperate to show that the universe created itself out of nothing, an immediate oxymoron, like saying that evolution is the explanation for the existence of life. Or if I say X created Y, I am assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of Y. If I say X created X, I am assuming the existence of X to explain the existence of X. And all I've really shown is that nonsense remains nonsense no matter who is spewing it, even when it is a high-powered, highly respected, highly intellectual academic like Richard Dawkins. It's absurd to complain that it is unthinkable for an unthinkable God to make everything out of nothing than to pretend that it is more thinkable that nothing should turn itself into everything. That's G.K. Chesterton. I believe, along with many others throughout history and today and forevermore, I believe the heavens declare the glory of God. And we have unraveled some of that glory. Arno Penzias, the Nobel Prize winner who discovered the microwave background on which a lot of the evidence for the Big Bang is based, he said, "Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to breed life. and one which has an underlying, one might say supernatural, plan. I believe that the universe is rationally intelligible. Einstein said the only incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And Wigner talked about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. How is it that a mathematician thinking in their head come up with equations that make sense of the world out there? Equations that seem to fit the universe. The irony of the atheistic position is evident. They say the driving force of evolution, which eventually produced our human cognitive faculties of reason, was not primarily concerned with truth at all, but with survival. And we all know what has happened and what still happens to truth when individuals or commercial enterprises or nations feel threatened, feel that their survival is being threatened. What happens to truth is that truth is compromised for the sake of self-preservation. And in a struggle for survival, if atheists are right, that we are the product of mindless, unguided natural processes, then they have given a strong reason to doubt the reliability of human cognitive faculties and therefore, inevitably, to doubt the validity of any belief they produce, including their atheism. Funny that. Yet, our atheist friends still insist that it is rational for them to believe that evolution, or the evolution of human reason, was not directed for the purpose of discovering truth. But, for me, as a theist, it is, in their mind, irrational for me to believe that human reason was designed and created by God to enable us to understand and believe the truth. Biblical theism asserts that ultimate reality is personal and intelligent, that the reason science works, this was the motivating force that drove the great pioneers of science, that the reason science works is that the universe out there, or in here, in this room, as close to home as can be, or as far and as fantastical as can be, the universe out there and the human mind in here that does the science, that does the discovering, that does the unraveling, are ultimately the product of the same intelligent, divine mind. Human beings are made in the image of God. That means science can be done. And that makes infinitely more sense, to me at least, than atheism does. All the good stuff's at the bottom. Before you go, remember to like this video if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss another whatever this is, episode, show. More specifically, so that you don't miss Piers asking Dawkins, what happens after you die? Don't miss it. Turn on notifications, don't miss it. My name is Christ Defender. I defend the Christian faith. I answer questions and criticisms concerning Christianity. If you like what I do and you would like to support me, there are 3 ways to do so. Merch, buy me a coffee, and Patreon. All the links are in the description box below. Please and thanks. Peace out laters.